Tate is on a mission to find his father, while Sam, Jan, Andre, and Case flee the city. This week we find out what happens at the Stein's Bottom Inn. I'm your narrator, Chad, and this is episode 18, chapter 22 of No Evil. Let's escape. Paul had been tending bar a long time, but this was a first, even for the bottom. It was strange, but he suddenly felt as if he was forgetting something. He felt a little like he'd been daydreaming, and now just realized someone had been talking to him the whole time. For some reason he felt anxious, and his heart was pounding. An inconspicuous man in a suit strode past him toward the back of the room, quickly followed by a total knockout. She was tall, leggy, and sexy as hell. She stood in front of them with her hands on her hips, then flicked her hair back and undressed in front of them. She swayed back and forth rhythmically. Paul turned away, but from the corner of his eye saw her tilt her head and reach out to him. She was more than enough to get the attention of everyone in the room. Can we help you?" Paul snickered.
"You can."
"Well, how?" There was a flash, and Paul felt a warm sensation in his back. Tate had the broken bottle planted firmly into the bartender's back. The bartender still hadn't taken his eyes off of her. The other two men were still staring at Sierra, too. She gently swayed, and they seemed to sway with her. They couldn't see Tate toss Sierra a corkscrew, and they didn't flinch when she drove it into their necks.
"These degenerates shall be saved."
Tate crouched over the lifeless body of the bartender and placed his hand on his forehead. The lights, already dim, flickered as a trail of light snaked its way out of Tate's mouth and down his arm before disappearing into the bartender's skull. Tate stood, walked around the bar, and did the same to the two others. When he finished, Tate instructed Jeff and Sierra to wait outside in the car. The others were instructed to stay in their places around the bar. The three dead men rose to their feet with their eyes not seeing and their ears not hearing. There was no effort as they got up. Their bodies flopped limply. Without bending their legs or taking any steps, they rose to their feet as if on a hinge. They shuffled back to their seats. The man in the back of the room didn't move. He didn't give the slightest hint he saw anything. Tate began to walk toward him and realized the man was humming to himself in the shadows. He reached the booth and sat down. The man didn't acknowledge him and went on humming, then raised his glass of beer and took a big gulp. His hand wavered as he attempted to sit the glass down gently, but he misjudged and slammed it down anyway. Cahard O'Byrne had seen better days. His face bore the hard, sunken features of a man who drank, smoked, and generally lived to excess. The corners of his mouth were speckled with white spittle. His face was shaved unevenly throughout. His hair was almost pure white, except two streaks of dark black in his sideburns. "You here to kill me, devil?" he finally said. He didn't look away from the beer. "Eh? You can talk, can't you, devil?"
"No, not here to kill you."
"Those men you just killed, I ain't got nothing to do with it, eh? I ain't got nothing to say about it neither. Never saw anybody."
"I won't hurt you."
"It's a funny thing when a man lies without moving his lips," the man said. For the first time, Tate saw fear on his father's face.
"I won't hurt you, Dad."
"Who are you? What do you want with me, devil?"
"Stop calling me devil."
The sound knocked the man backward in the booth and he slumped over. Tate feared he killed the frail fool and leaned over him. His father reached out and touched his face. The man began to blubber ridiculously. Then he pulled his hand away and slammed it into the side of Tate's face. "You can't be my son. My son is dead. Ran away years ago," his father said. His speech was slurred worse than before.
"Listen, you old fool. I've been blessed."
"Blessed are we? Blessed are we? For we're all part of Jackie's army," he belched out a verse unevenly. Tate grabbed the table and the floorboards groaned as they split apart. He hurled it effortlessly aside, reached forward and put his hand on his father's head. The light welled up in his mouth, and his eyes glowed deeply white. The light snaked around his arm. Cahard pushed back, knocking Tate to the floor. The light disappeared. Tate got up to retaliate, but saw the look of awe on his father's face. He didn't appear afraid now, just shocked. But all ambiguity was tossed aside when his father beamed brightly. "You're an angel. My son has come back to me. An angel.
I told you. I've been blessed. Now, you will be.
Tate grabbed his father's hand tightly and wrenched it. He dragged him out of the booth and placed a hand on his forehead. The light rose from him again. The others had been dead when Tate enlightened them. This time was different. He felt everything his father felt. A wondrous ripple of joy permeated them, and there was a brief moment when Tate thought he saw beyond. It was just a fleeting image, a flash really, but he saw an angel spread apart his father's soul like a curtain and enter his body. Tate pulled his hand away and the light died. His back and arms ached like he hadn't used his body in years. His father's savage drunkenness was defeated. There was clarity between the two men. For the first time there was understanding and sympathy. The sense of loathing Tate had felt for his father was gone, and he knew his father felt the same. "Do you know what this means?" His father was smiling with tears trailing down his leathery face. "What we are meant to do?"
Yes. It means it's time.
"That's right, my boy. Revelation 16. It's time." Cahard looked at his son and remembered. He remembered the joy he felt at his birth, and the sadness when his family was torn apart. Cahard admitted to himself that it was his own fault. He was disappointed it couldn't have been another way. Now, with the plan clear in his mind, he knew it was the only way. They moved to the front of the bar again. Tate stopped at the bartender and his two lifeless buddies.
Spread the word.
The men got up and shuffled to the door ahead of Tate and his father. Screams rose up immediately. Tate walked to his car, and his father followed. They watched as the bartender and the two drunks delivered Goth's wrath upon the heathens. It was good. "There has to be 7, doesn't there?" Cahard asked as they pulled up to a stoplight.
I'm alone. So far.
"Well, there has to be 7. That's how it's written in Scripture."
Yes.
In the distance behind them there was chaos. Men and women darted in all different directions as 3 men carrying knives hacked and slashed their way along the sidewalk. Sirens wailed not far off. One by one the bartender bent beside the fallen and caressed them. The fallen then rose and joined in the killing. "It's just as I imagined it would be," Cahard said giddily. From the corner of his eye Tate saw a flash. On his left a sports bar was showing the same image on a half a dozen screens. There was a looping video of a man being attacked by a woman, then all at once they disappear.
Wait.
Tate stepped out of the car and walked to the bar. The few people inside were fixed to the news. The sound was on loud. "The man in the video positively identified as Sam Munson, who is being sought in connection with a double homicide from earlier this week. The footage was posted to social media through an account that has been confirmed to belong to Andre Murray, an intern with the Chronicle Standard newspaper. Munson lived at this apartment complex in the city's West End. Munson was described by neighbors as quiet and unassuming. Miss Natalia Angelus." Tate's father stepped to his side and watched along with him as the news detailed Munson. They didn't say a word until it finished, and they were on their way back to the car. By the time Tate strapped his seatbelt back on, the murderous riot had consumed the entire street. "So, there is another," Cahard said. "We have to find him."
Yes.
The sedan pulled away, leaving the entire street engulfed in violence. Gunshots popped. Fires exploded storefronts. The sound of breaking glass. Cries for mercy. Behind it all was a growling roar. The sound of 100 corpses shuffling themselves up the street in unison. Case's SUV slowly turned down a narrow lane. He looked ahead at the dunes of white powder, stopped, and shifted the SUV into 4-wheel drive. The cabin was a 10-minute further drive down the road. The SUV managed the snow easily, but deep ruts in the lane intermittently forced the vehicle up on one side, and it slammed down with enough force to rattle everyone inside. The cabin's clapboard siding was painted bright red. It loomed half in shadow under a great old pine trees on all sides. At the end of the lane was a small clearing, and Case parked outside. "This is where you'll be staying until we can get this sorted out," Case said. He took the keys out of the ignition, got it out of the SUV, and unlocked the cabin door. "Come on in," he called back to them. "No TV, but there's a radio here," he said as he turned it on. "Yep, batteries still work." "Wait, what's that? Turn that up," Jan said. "Did you hear that?" "No, what?" Andre said. "I heard Sam's name." Case turned up the volume and sat at the radio on the coffee table. Tonight, the Munson story continues to develop. Police have called off the search for the murder suspect on an emergency basis as both city and provincial officers deal with an unprecedented wave of violence. Hundreds are believed dead to this point. Police are urging residents to avoid city streets as long as the riot continues. Mayor Whitney Sitchin says the city is working with police to confine the violence to the industrial-based east side in hopes of minimizing the danger to residents. Case turned the radio off again. Each face in the cabin shared the same look of confusion.
"What the hell is going on now?"
Case said.
"Riots?"
"I don't remember any protesting or anything going on," said Andre.
"Yeah, me either,"
agreed Jan. Sam didn't speak. In part he was worried the riots were about him, but something told him that it wasn't the full story. Another more sinister thought persisted in the back of his mind, but he refused to entertain it.
"Wait a minute. Grab me that ladder,"
Case said. He pointed behind Sam, and Sam obliged by picking the wooden ladder off the wall. Case took the ladder from him and unfolded it in the center of the room. Above them, a rope hung in the center of a raised ceiling tile. Case took 2 steps up the ladder and tugged the rope, opening a latch to the attic. Sam stepped on the bottom rung and steadied the ladder as Case ascended the steps to the top. Then he reached deep inside the attic until only 1 foot was visible. A moment later, he was descending the steps with a portable television in one hand.
"Forgot about this. Only use it once in a while for a ball game."
Case set the miniature TV on the table and blew some of the dust off. The power adapter was still plugged in. Case plugged it into the wall, extended the antenna, and flicked the power button. After some adjustments, Case was able to pick up a local news station. The broadcast flickered through several different shots before settling on an aerial view from a helicopter. The glow of fire gave the violence a surreal backdrop. The devastation was unbelievable. Half the city's industrial core was on fire, and the other half covered in suffocating black smoke. A crowd marched menacingly in unison. The camera picked up movement, and the image shook wildly as the camera fixed on a man running down an alley. All at once the marching crowd rushed toward the man, swarmed him like a hive of bees, and consumed him. The camera pulled back and then panned to a location a few blocks ahead. Police, fire, and ambulance vehicles were parked across the center of the road. Dozens of police dressed in riot gear knelt in front of the vehicles. Sam fixated on the wall of flashing lights, his vision blurred.
"This can't all be because of me, can it?"
he said to Case. Case didn't respond, and Sam didn't expect him to. At that moment, the camera shook again and focused behind the police barricade. Another group of hundreds, maybe thousands of people were galloping full stride toward the police. Their arms were sagged at their sides as they ran full tilt into the police. Muzzle flashes lit up the shadowy street as the police fired on their attackers. They didn't slow. The crowd on the opposite side of the barricade, having finished tearing apart their last victim, now ran at the police from the other side. They smashed the police from both sides like 2 freight trains. The bodies seemed to bubble in the pile.
This can't be real,"
Andre said.
"I can't watch this anymore,"
said Jan. Case wiped his hands down his unshaven face. He looked years older than he did just a few days ago. Sam felt a twinge of guilt at the thought. He would have given anything to take that hurt back.
"I can't stay,"
Case said.
"What?"
said Sam.
"My wife, my kids. I can't leave them in the city. Not with this going on. What happens if the cops can't stop them? I have to go back."
"If you're going back into that, I can't just sit here," said Sam.
"Wait. You, Sam. You could go. Use your whatever. And you could go and bring them back here."
"I don't know, Case. I don't even know if it's safe. I can't. I don't want to risk hurting your family." Case nodded, contemplated things for a moment, then grabbed his keys off the counter and marched to the door. Sam followed. Case left his jacket behind, and Jan picked it up and followed them out the door. Andre sat at the couch staring at the TV. It was off, but he couldn't move.
"Andre?"
Jan said as she leaned back into the door.
This is fucked up, Jan. This is beyond fucked up."
"I know.
How are the cops supposed to handle this? They just got overrun in 5 seconds.
"Well, look, how many riots have there been in the world?" Jen moved away from the doorway and sat beside him on the couch. "I don't know. A lot, I guess," Andre said. He took Jan's hand in his. He scanned her face, then leaned in and kissed her firmly.
"We have to go help Case get his family,"
she said.
"Let's go."
They piled back in the SUV, and this time Case didn't bother to move slowly. The SUV slammed from side to side down the lane. Then Case sped along the county roads until he hit the highway. The wind picked up and the snow was drifting in round dunes across the road, but Case didn't slow. Sam wanted to tell Case to be careful, but he could feel him brooding. The feeling began as cases, but it soon permeated Sam. A stewing panic built inside of him. It was begging him to go home. He looked to Case, and then back to Jan and Andre. Then he disappeared. That's all for episode 18, chapter 22 of No Evil. If you're enjoying the podcast, let us know what you think in the comments. Give us a like, a share, a fancy doll hair. Do all the social media things. Become an escapist by subscribing and clicking the bell. And you know what else you could do? You could teach Parakeet to do the monkey while typing a primate manifesto about the sincerity of corn chips, then tiptoe to Tahoe for a crime conference. Oh, and tell him maybe Escape sent you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the next escape.